It was already well known for some time now that buying a new generation graphics card such as an RTX 3080 or RX 6800 XT was quite difficult, but now it just seems like it's next to impossible. Let's discuss that in this video. Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video. Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here, welcome back to the channel and I hope you've all been doing well. I wanted to make this video just to discuss the current state of the graphics card market, why things have gotten so bad as they are now, and when can we expect the market to hopefully get better. 2020 was a pretty horrible year for obvious reasons, however when it came to the computer hardware space and consumer technology industry, it wasn't as terrible because we did get to see a lot of new exciting stuff come out and products be announced. Noting some of the most important releases, we first had Nvidia's RTX 30 series launched back in September based on their Ampere architecture, and unlike Turing, they actually brought forth a decent generational leap in performance. Maybe not all models, but most of the GPUs in the lineup were a decent improvement gen on gen. Then we had AMD announce Zen 3 Ryzen 5000 series processors along with new Radeon RX 6000 series GPUs based on RDNA 2. After being absent from the high-end GPU segment, AMD finally seemed like they were back and ready to compete with Nvidia's high-end offerings, but with some pretty compelling prices at that. Of course, we also can't forget about the new consoles announced by both Microsoft and Sony, which were also powered by AMD tech. These consoles were quite impressive when it came to the tech that was packed in there, being powered by 8-core Zen 2 CPUs, along with Navi graphics with features from the RDNA 2 architecture. Lots of exciting stuff, which naturally a lot of people wanted to get, and due to the current situation of the world with lockdowns, people spending more time at home than ever, etc., this facilitated the demand to insane levels that it's become near impossible to find any of this stuff in stock. Now, I've recently made a similar video talking about the current situation around the new Ryzen 5000 series processors, so I won't be talking about that here, as this video will be more focused on what's going on with the GPU market. If you are interested in hearing my thoughts about the CPUs, then I recommend checking that video out. Link for that will be in the description. When it came to this mess of a GPU market, it all started with the RTX 30 series, where as soon as the first card was launched and had quote-unquote hit store shelves, they were gone in seconds, sold out, whether it was your local brick and mortar store or an online retailer. I remember actually getting up that morning and camping out on websites like Newegg and the Nvidia store page just to see the card instantly get sold out at 9 AM. I mean, at 1 second it said coming soon, then all of a sudden it just changed to out of stock. And the websites were just awful at that time. They were atrociously slow, crashing, and giving people errors. The night before, I had even considered driving down to my local computer hardware store, and I'm glad I didn't because a buddy of mine who was in the area told me that there were already like 50 people lined up the night before and were waiting, which I thought was just insane because I personally hadn't ever heard of that many people lining up for PC hardware that early, but I guess that just goes to show you the crazy demand. So this carried on for the following months, and the situation never improved. When the RTX 3090 launched, it was actually worse. They had even less stock for that GPU. The 3070 came out, it was the same story as the 3080. And we also had the 3060 Ti, where that GPU was also in low supply, being met with crazy high demand. Actually more so than when compared to the bigger Ampere GPUs, as this was the mid-range card, so more feasible, thus higher demand. With AMD, the situation is actually a lot worse. Despite them throwing shade at their competitor for struggling with their supply, they ended up having a lot less GPUs in inventory, and their prices are just all over the place. Unless you can manage to buy a reference card from the AMD official store, then good luck trying to get one of those cards near MSRP, and even that might be almost next to impossible now, considering we've been hearing reports for quite some time that AMD is soon going to be discontinuing the reference models as they want to opt for selling these cards through AIBs and their board partners. At least with Nvidia, you had options to buy from multiple retailers with various models from AIBs, so there was a much greater chance of you getting an RTX 30 series GPU as opposed to an RX 6000 series GPU. Regardless, whether it was Team Red or Team Green, buying a new generation graphics card was and is still a very challenging process. Along with the very low supply and extreme demand, it also didn't help that these new GPUs were being targeted by scalpers, who would use bots and scripts to snag up the GPUs from online inventories and then post them on marketplaces like eBay and then sell them at astronomically higher prices. Look at some of these listings. It's disgusting to say the least, but at first you would think, who in the world is going to be paying, $3,000 for an RTX 3080 or, $1,000 for an RX 6800? That's almost double. There's almost no way someone sensible would be paying that much for these GPUs at these obscene prices. Well, If people weren't buying them, then scalpers wouldn't be so active and eager to sell these GPUs in the first place, which only proves that people are buying them because either they're loaded or they just don't care or they're extremely desperate at this point. Which, while we're on the topic, whatever you do, please do not try to buy from these scalpers because all it does is just encourage them to continue scalping, which further just ruins the market and causes this artificial inflation in GPU prices. Anyways, if that wasn't bad enough, we then had two more huge factors come into play which then completely butchered the entire GPU market, and any hope of us seeing the market come back down to earth was lost for the foreseeable future. The first was that part of the 2018 US trade tariffs agreement, hardware components such as GPUs and motherboards had been excluded with a given expiration date of August 7th, 2020, where now major manufacturers would have to deal with increased import costs, and thus these additional costs would then be relayed onto the consumer in the form of increased prices. This was something I even expressed in my Asus RTX 3090 review, where GPUs straight from the manufacturers are given MSRPs that are significantly above the MSRP of a Founders Edition card when you compare the two. Depending on the model, it can be anywhere from a couple $100s to even $500, maybe even more depending on where you live in the world. Here in Canada, Asus has listed their RTX 3090 Strix model for a whopping $2,700. Sometimes I've even seen it listed above that. The other major culprit for increasing GPU prices and demand was that crypto mining has made a big return. With currencies like Ethereum reaching new all-time highs, miners are back in full force. So we were already dealing with product shortages and crazy high demand, then tariffs further increased those prices, and following that we have another mining boom, so no matter how you look at it, the situation has just become extremely dire, with really no sign of improvement anytime soon. One might think, well, since there's so much demand, why don't the manufacturers just ramp up production? Well, like I already mentioned at the beginning, with the current state of the world, a lot of plants and factories are operating at limited capacities or have shut down. Along with that, logistics has been severely impacted too. It's not like this event just, targets one specific sector. It's affected everything, and that causes a further chain reaction. Wafers are in short supply. Take AMD, for example, as they have a deal with TSMC for their 7nm node. A lot of this is being allocated towards the consoles. Then they've also got server chips, Threadripper, HEDT, mobile laptop chips, which they actually just announced a whole bunch of new chips at CES 2021, desktop Ryzen parts, and then the RX 6000 series GPUs, which now that I'm thinking about it, I guess it's why they had put on such a passive or boring show at CES this year. Because even if they announce the products, they won't be available for a while until you actually see them in a healthy supply. Along with short supply of wafers, Nvidia is said to be dealing with a shortage of G6X modules for Micron. Components like PWM controllers are in low supply. Even car manufacturers are reporting on reductions due to the semiconductor shortage, where many of them are being forced to close down manufacturing plants. Those are just a few examples, but like I said, everything is just affected here. At this point, buying a new generation GPU seems like it's become next to impossible. There's barely any stock. If you put yourself on a back order, then you can expect to wait several weeks, if not even months. Along with that, you're going to have to deal with significantly marked up prices. Forget about scalpers, but now even retailers are obscenely marking up prices. At Canada Computers, I saw an RX 6800 non-XT get listed for 1,000 Canadian dollars, and RX 6800 XTs are going for around $1,200 to $1,300, which is around $400 to $500 above MSRP, which seems ridiculous, right? Well, not to everyone, because as soon as they're listed, they're gone within minutes or even seconds, which again just goes to show you how crazy the demand is if people are willing to spend so much money on these cards when they really aren't even worth that much. When the 3080 was first launched, I made a video back then talking about the situation, and at that time I was a bit optimistic that this would hopefully be resolved by the first quarter of 2021. And at that time, that was back in September. But as the months went on and I had friends telling me they were still waiting on their day one orders, it became quite apparent that this wasn't going to be resolved anytime soon. Also, a recent report came out from overclocking.com. This is a French hardware site where they have gotten some information that manufacturers have received a supply of RTX 2060 and 2060 Super GPUs to reintroduce into the market. Now, this could make sense because of reasons mentioned already. Nvidia might be leveraging an older process to kind of fill in that gap for lower end segments. Remember, they recently announced an RTX 3060 for $330 at CES, and a lot of people were hoping they would have announced the 3050 Ti and 3050 to target lower end segments like the $200 price point. However, what makes this report bizarre is that they're saying that the 2060 will be marketed at just slightly over 300 euros, and the 2060 Super should be targeted at 400 euros, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, as then it would clash with the current Gen X60 class cards. And at that point, you're better off putting that money towards the newer stuff, obviously. So take this report with a grain of salt. There's just a lot of stuff that doesn't add up or make sense here. At this point, I have no idea when the market is going to get better and normalize. It could start recovering as early as spring of this year, later this year in, November or December, or who knows, it might not even be until sometime in 2022, which at that point might as well just wait for the next gen stuff, right? Again, this is dependent on a whole bunch of other stuff, lockdowns, when we might recover from this whole crisis. When will manufacturers be able to ramp up production and, operate it as normally? You could try your luck with the used market, but because of the recent mining boom, even older hardware has started to increase in price. Like take an RTX 2080 Super, for example, on Kijiji, which is a local used marketplace here in the GTA. They're being listed anywhere from $800 to $1,200, which is seriously overpriced considering that the new RTX 3060 Ti is, slightly faster, if not worse, will match the 2080 Super. And, but after everything is said and done, at retailers goes for around $700 new. So it just doesn't make sense to buy any of these used GPUs because they're obviously getting marked up much higher, and people are just taking advantage of the current situation. Which is actually kind of funny when you think about it, because I remember when the 3070 was announced and was touted as being faster than a 2080 Ti, a lot of people were making fun of 2080 Ti owners for spending so much on a graphics card when they could have quote unquote bought a faster GPU for almost less than half the price. But then people were saying stuff like how much the 2080 Ti had been devalued. But then now you look at the current situation and 2080 Ti's, they're not affected in terms of value too much because prices are just so sky high. So not only is buying a new graphics card near impossible and not feasible, but even the used market has become chaotic. So you might as well just try your luck buying a console then, right? Oh wait, you can't do that either. This situation just sucks.